Okay, welcome to our second live stream event here. I'm Zacca Newman, RUN2PB co-founder, and also runner myself. I've got a panel of guests with us who have kindly taken the time to join us and share their personal insights about this topic. Joining us, we've got, sorry, I've just thought if Steph, she's just adding you back in, Steph. Sorry, guys. We have a technical thing. Okay, so joining us, we've got Josh Harris over in Tasmania. So Josh started running in 2000. He was inspired by the Sydney 2000 Games, Olympic Games. He's dreamed of making an Australian team. His dream of making the Australian team came true in 2017, where he ran 2 hours 17 over the marathon. He went on to qualify for the World Championships in London. Josh has recently commenced coaching with RUN2PB, bringing together his 20 years plus of running experience, as well as a degree in exercise science. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Zacca. Glad to be here. Looking forward to it.
Great to have you, mate. Over in Melbourne, we've got Madeline Heiner. Maddie has represented Australia on 10 occasions. She's a 2-time Olympic finalist over the steeple and 5K at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games. And off the track, Madeline is a pharmacist and also coaches athletes online at RUN2PB. Welcome, Madeline.
Hi, everyone.
Now, also in Melbourne, we've got Stu McLay. Stu is a life member at the prestigious Doncaster Athletics Club in Victoria. In the early 2000s, represented Australia twice internationally in competitions for athletes with a disability in the TF12 vision impaired category. In track and field, over the 400 and javelin, as well as the pentathlon. Stu has since moved into a focus on distance running and has become a member of the RUN2PB online coaching group. And Stu, I'm actually Stu's coach. So welcome, Stu.
Thanks, Zacca. Looking forward to it. It's a great topic.
It is, Stu. Looking forward to having a chat. And over on the Sapphire Coast of New South Wales, we've got Steph Auston, one of Australia's most decorated runners in the trail and ultra running scene. Steph's finished top 20 in the 2019 World Trail Running Championships. She's a 2-time winner of the 6-foot track marathon, won the 56K 2-bays trail run down here in Victoria in the Mornington Peninsula. And also away from the trails, Steph is a physiotherapist and a coach at RUN2PB. Welcome, Steph. Don't know if Steph is picking that up. You there, Steph? We might come back to Steph. I think she's got an issue with it. Oh, you there, Steph? No, Scott. Anyway, we'll fix you up.
Yeah.
Oh,
hello.
Yeah.
Sorry,
hey, Steph.
technical issues, I think.
That's all right. All good. Good to have you, Steph. So we're going to kick it off, and we're going to just talk about. Hey, Steph. We're going to kick it off and talk about running in your mental health and well-being. And we want to talk about individually, if you can just go through what the role running plays in your own personal mental health and well-being. We're going to start with you, Stu. If you want to kick it off.
Look, I spoke to you, a little while back on one of the earlier podcasts, Zacca, and we talked about the fact that it's a really important part of my mindfulness. We hear a lot about mindfulness these days, and we see it in the workplace. Kids are doing it at school. And for me, my running is very much my mindfulness. It's my time. And in thinking about what I was going to say here, I posed 2 questions, and that was, who do I run for and why do I run? And I think when it comes down to it, I run for myself. And I run for all those good reasons that we identify, I think. And why do I run for? I run because it makes me feel good. It's about my physical well-being. It's about my mental well-being. But also I run because prior to, I'm a full-time dad now. Prior to doing that, I was in a job where I had to be on show. I had to be on point all day long, every day as a school teacher. And I felt that I lacked some of that autonomy for myself, some of that control. But running gives me that control. And I think that's really good for my mental health, is that I have a level of ownership or a level of control when I'm out running. And that I think, I don't think that can be stressed enough in how that makes me feel really, really good.
Yes. There's so much in there, Stu, and we'll probably dig a bit deeper across the stream. But yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. And Josh, how about you, mate? Tell me about running and its role in your mental health and wellbeing.
Yeah, Stu had a really good answer there, and some of that is certainly true for me as well. I've always prioritised running as a non-negotiable in my day, and consequently, it takes until I kind of get my run done to feel like I've achieved what I wanted to for the day, and I always feel relaxed afterwards. It gives me a sense of purpose, and I know we'll touch on it later, but there was a time where I wasn't able to run, and you know, that was a challenging time for many reasons, which kind of comes back to you know, showing how important it is for me.
Yeah, and you've gone through struggles with some injuries, and yeah, coming back, it's obviously been a big thing in your life that's back with you again. Madeline, let's go down to you. What about you? The role running plays in your mental health and wellbeing.
Yeah, it's funny. I've had to think about this question, and I feel like my answer now would be so different than it would have been if you'd asked me this question really any time up until probably 2018. I think if you'd asked me then, I would have dismissed it as a bit of an afterthought. Like, I don't think I'd ever considered what effect it had on me. If you'd asked me why I run, I had reasons. It was, you know, that I enjoyed it. It made me happy. I got results. Obviously, you know, when you run well, things feel good. And even though I had setbacks in those years, I still don't think I'd really kind of seen the value of running aside from the opportunities it gave me and maybe the people I met. But now my answer is really similar to Josh and Stu. I think it gives you a light when, you know, maybe there's a bit of darkness. It gives a purpose. It gives you a sense of achievement, you know, particularly at times where maybe in that day or that time period, you know, you're not feeling like you're achieving much else. If you could just rally for the run, you always enjoy it. And it gives you that something that you did achieve and tick off. And I think as well, and I don't know, you know, if we'll come to this later, but what I didn't really realize till really the last 6 months, but I guess the last 18 months too, is what it gives you in terms of people and the community that it provides. And I've always been a part of that community. I just haven't really recognized the value that it adds to me in my life. And I think that's sort of, obviously, you know, when you're going through a bad race, a bad session, an injury, whatever, things that runners can relate to. But what you realize is that people who run are humans, and they also go through the same challenges you do in life. And for me, you know, particularly the last 6 months where I've had, you know, a doozy of challenges thrown at me, so much of my support has come from the running community, because a lot of them are, you know, the people who are my supports. So I would say, yeah, it gives that structure, goal setting, all those sorts of things, but really people as well, which provide all of that.
Yeah, and I think also for you, I mean, I think some people associate, you know, Olympians on this pedestal of, like, you know, you don't relate to the everyday, but you go through the same struggles as everyday runners as well, and it doesn't matter what level you're at, you know. And to be able to hear you talk about the things that you connect with as a runner in general, regardless of the speed you run, yeah, it's really, I think, good for all runners to hear that.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, I mean, you know, in the people I'm sort of referencing, it's literally been some of my athletes who, you know, have been able to rally for me when they can tell I was a bit flat, and it's opened the door for them to have the same sort of chats and, you know, us to talk about what running gives. So yeah, absolutely. It's really, you know, it doesn't matter how fast you're running.
And Steph, over to you. The role running plays in your mental health and wellbeing. Let's see if we've got you there, Steph.
Sorry, I can't really hear very well. I think my technology is not that good, but I'll put my little input in. Running is just it's certainly something that makes me function better on a day-to-day basis. It might not be the only thing I look forward to in the day, but it certainly starts each day off in the best way possible. I'm really grateful. I think one thing that running has taught me, and to with, I guess, your mental health and things, is how to be grateful for things. For you go through times when you can't run, or just things are getting you down, and it's just something that you can it generally always makes you feel better, even if at the time is hard. Afterwards you always feel better for it. Like even at the moment, being in the dark every morning, starting a run with a headlamp, you get to see the sunrise each morning. So there's definitely I think that the thing that running's given me is it makes me, I think, function better as a person, but it also has taught me a lot about gratitude and just to appreciate things a little bit more. So yeah, I think running is very integral to my I think running and fresh air are very integral to my mental health and happiness. So as long as I'm alive, I will be a runner of some description.
No, that's great. And you mentioned gratitude there, Steph. And another word that I guess it's almost trending in a way, and sometimes you hear about it, is resilience, and the role resilience and running plays. And I guess more so about what it has taught all of you guys about, what running has taught you about resilience. So maybe you can all expand on that one. I'll throw to you, Stu. Let's go with, So what has running taught you about resilience?
Look, absolutely. Look, and can I start by sort of saying, when I was thinking about some of the answers to the questions that we were going to be discussing tonight, I kept coming back to the idea of perspective. And I think, and I'll mention that probably a few times in some of my answers tonight, the idea of putting things in perspective, I think, can help us become a little bit more resilient. So when we do have a bad race or we do have a bad training session, we can become more resilient by getting some perspective and saying, there will be another race, there will be another training session, there will be another time where I can redeem myself. I should try not to be so hard on myself. And I think that can make us a bit stronger. And even I suppose I said to my wife this afternoon, can I use you as an anecdotal example? And she's never been a competitive runner. She's never done competitive sport in her life, but she took up running a few years ago, and she said to me, will you help me get around my first marathon? Now, she's really driven when it comes to her career, but she was never competitive with sport, and she was never, but I think what I'm saying is that she was able to translate her life experiences into running and use some of the resilience that she'd had through her professional life. And she used that strength to complete a marathon. And that was, a great honor for me to share that with her. So I think running we can become resilient as runners through our own life experiences. And on the other hand, what we do in running can also translate into our life experiences as well. And I think that can be really empowering, and it can make us stronger. And I feel that I've got to work a bit harder, how can I make myself more resilient? And I think I can make myself more resilient by getting that perspective, by saying there is another training session when things don't go well. There is another race. And I think that the other thing also is that we train ourselves to be, or I certainly, are conscious of training myself to be physically resilient. And I think that's to the detriment of our mental and our psychological resilience. So as a runner, that's something I need to work on, is that I probably take that for granted sometimes when I am working really hard on my physical resilience and not paying enough attention to that psychological, mental resilience that we do need.
Yeah, some great points there, Stu. And I know from coaching a lot of athletes, that perspective thing is really key. I mean, I know we all as runners, we're stubborn, and we do get caught up in details and sessions, and we're hard on ourselves. But then, yeah, you're right, we do need to show perspective and say, hey, there is another session. There is always going to be another race. So, I think there's some great points there, Stu. Over to you, Josh. What about yourself, mate? What has running taught you about resilience? And I know you've gone through your challenges just coming back from a long-term injury, so I'm sure you've got a few things that you could impart.
Yeah, absolutely. I think going through a routine with training in my kind of teenage years really gave me some skills, not only resilience, but dedication, work ethic, and a few of those other kind of values that you link back into your every aspect of life, as Stu mentioned. And things that we do, such as following the program, getting out before work, after work, in poor conditions, regardless of things that are going on in life, I think that teaches you to be resilient, and it gives you, the work ethic, like I said before, that you can apply to all aspects of your life. In terms of physical resilience, there was a point where I felt unstoppable physically, but mental resilience probably stays with you forever in whatever you're pursuing.
Yeah, that's those life lessons you learn as a runner. I think we always, as runners, we take it for granted what we do and what the sort of skills we've learned over the years as runners, and what we can apply in our life. And I think and Mads, you've gone through some challenges as you alluded to earlier. What about you? What has running taught you about resilience?
Yeah, well, I think my first point is I want to recruit Stu to be on part of my team. He's I love everything he's saying. I agree with this, and I love the idea of reminding yourself that there's always another race and another session. So I'm listening. I'm learning a lot here myself. I think, again, linking into what Stu said, I think running has taught me a lot more that's applicable to life than I've realized. And in many ways, it's because I've not needed to use it. So I think, my own challenges with running, you obviously pick a bad race or an injury, and, for me, surgery last year. And I feel like from that, I had practice of seeing a problem as a huge problem, thinking, how am I going to get through it? And inevitably getting through it. And I used exactly the same sort of approaches this year in, challenges off the track, where I sort of had the same method of process of, realizing what the problem was, breaking it down, working out how I was going to handle it, setting little goals, daily rituals, everything the same way I do with running, just with life. And it was the first time I've ever really sat back and thought, hang on, I know how to do this, because I've done it before. And, sometimes the problems seem bigger than other ones. But I think, just those basic processes that I'd never realized were useful in anything other than running, absolutely were. And I think I had the tools to know kind of how to break things down. So, that's my response.
Yeah, no, there's some great insights in there, and thanks for being so open about that, Matt. Steph, over to you. What about yourself? Obviously, you're out there hammering away on the trails and doing some of these big ultra events. There's a lot of resilience involved in that. What has running taught you about resilience?
I think that they say, not that I've done 100 miles yet, that was next on the agenda, but they say that's like life in a day, running 100 miles. And I really think that it's so true. Like, there's the highs, the lows, and I think it teaches you that you are so much tougher than you think you are, and you can get through so much more than you might have thought beforehand. I think then it teaches just how unbreakable you can be, and that, just like the others have said about like goal setting and applying that to just life situations, that you can sort of break down anything into a problem that can be solved, and whether it be running or something at work or something in life, you can definitely you have the tools to be able to work through that regardless. So I think I get very inspired by people's resilience in events. I certainly in the ultra world, I know I ran like 100K and in my last event, and it took me 9.5 hours, but I've have athletes that I coach and it takes them nearly 3 times as long as that. And I think that's just amazing resilience. Like, I'm just in awe of people that can do those things. And yeah, I think that resilience sort of breeds inspiration as well. And I think that that's a really good quality to have. And yeah, it's certainly something that you can use through all different aspects of your life. So yeah, everyone's a lot tougher than they give themselves credit for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and look, just following on from that, and you've all gone through your different running journeys and your challenges along the way, but I'm guessing, you know, you've all had some aspects, you know, I suppose I'll rephrase the question as this: have you had aspects in your running careers, such as injuries and or life outside stresses that have really affected your running? And how have you navigated through them and maybe used running as a way to get through them as well? We'll go back to you, Steph, just to mix it up. Do you want to have a crack at that one?
Yeah. So I guess I've had two major injury setbacks, and I guess that the throughout everything that I had two stress fractures that put me out of running for quite a while, and I just think that I had faith no matter what that I would get back and it would be okay. And I think that does then apply to situations in races too. Like I know when you run 100k, you go through many patches where you feel pretty horrible, or in all different races, and you just have to have this unwavering belief that, you know, things are going to be all right and you're going to get through. And I think when you get through all different types of adversities, whether they be in life or injury or whatever it is, it's just having faith that things will work out. I'm a big fan of this fella called Ross Egley, and he has this thing about, he says to be cheerful in the face of adversity. And I know I'm certainly not like that all the time, but I try to remind myself that, tackle, problems with a smile as much as you can. You'll get through and you'll be a better person for it in the long run as well. So I think, that's one thing that running's taught me, and then I try some days easier than others to apply to everyday life as well.
Yeah, no, that's spot on. I think, that just even in general, what the world's going through, or just being kind and smiling at people can be just a small act that can really help people. And I think, like you said, getting through some challenging times. Maddie, I'll go with you next. Do you want to answer this one around the aspects in your running and, some of the outside stresses that affected your running, how you've been able to work through them?
Yeah. I'm going to start this by saying that I'm going to go off on a little bit of a different tangent here and not talk about my injury, just because I've spoken about that one a little bit. I have a sports psych who's a wonderful man called Mark, who for years has talked to me about, I guess, the fact that your body can't really differentiate between where stress is coming from. So we have our stress from training, but that's not the only type of stress that we're presented with. And whether the stress comes from work or from family or from finances or from your social or whatever, not sleeping, whatever it is, your body identifies it all as fatigue. And as much as I love Mark and listen to most things he says, I think until the last few months, both COVID and other things, it's only in the last few months that I've really taken that on board and kind of realized that is true. And for me, I guess my experiences with that were obviously a very high level of emotional stress earlier in the year, which obviously makes you fatigued and you're not running very well. But self-explanatory, I adjusted my running, but I actually had some blood tests done just, to see sort of a few markers. And it was really interesting to have a very physical, measurable way of describing what emotional stress had done. And it probably took that for me. And for me, it was literally my liver enzymes, my kidney function, my troponin, my heart, everything was saying this, you need a break. You're not coping with what's going on right now. And so it was a good moment for me to kind of not be too resilient and just allow myself to sit back and take what my body would take. And so I guess my answer here is kind of realizing wherever stress is coming from, that you sometimes need to listen to it. And for me, what that meant was, obviously pulling back my running a little bit, even though I kept it going because it was that thing that was providing me so much joy. But, really adjusting things and being realistic with what my body could handle. And I think, again, thinking of 2020, I in some ways got lucky that a lot of the stress was taken from me when the Olympics were postponed. And it really gave me that chance to say, all right, your body's showing you very clear signs that these stresses, even though, yes, sure, you're not running your normal mileage, the other things are having pretty significant impact. So still keep the running in, but, adjust it to a level that is beneficial rather than, than detrimental.
Yeah, I guess as runners, you kind of focus in on the running. You feel like you're so. I guess you just keep hammering away at it until something gives, and you go, "I've actually got to do something about this. This is more than just running. I need to sort everything out and to do what you did and find out and be able to adjust." I guess is yeah.
And I was just going to say as well, the other temptation, of course, which I had and lots of people have, and I know so many of my athletes had, when COVID restrictions happened, was almost to pour all your energy into that. And there's so many risks with that as well. So, for me, I obviously had Craig helping guide me to encourage me to run enough, but, to certainly not mess up my running, to be able to keep it as that joy and that pleasure in the day. While I could, and there's other times obviously you need to push, but so I think it's kind of finding that balance, also not by not doing too much when life stresses come along.
So over to you, Josh. Now, Josh, we mentioned in the preview or the intro that you actually realised your dream and made that World Championships team in the marathon, towed the line, but unfortunately DNF'd and then was out for a while, 12 months plus with an injury. So I'm thinking you've got a little bit to add on this one. But yeah, how do you want to have a go at the question, mate?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a really tough time in my life, and I was faced with the potential challenge of never being able to run again, which wasn't something that I really wanted to have to deal with, but it's something that I almost had to come to terms with at that point. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be running, but I think everyone needs to have an outlet of something that they can do that gives them that satisfaction. And for me, I found cycling, and I got very similar satisfaction from that as what I did with running. And it may not be sport, it may be in another aspect of life, but I really use that time to shift my focus a little bit to other areas of life and almost tried to forget about running in a way. And I'm lucky that now I'm at the point where I'm starting to run pretty well again, but I still have to go through thoughts that I'm never going to make it back to that level again. But you just have to come to terms with that and change your goalposts a bit, I suppose. And the other part of the question, outside stresses as well, that's certainly something that you've got to consider. And I know we talked about it on the podcast last week that I had a pretty rough week before my marathon PB, but I got to the start line and everything just shifted. My mind focused in on the goal that I wanted to achieve, and that was all that mattered for that 2.5 hours or the few hours beforehand. And I was able to just completely switch anything else off in my head, and I guess that shows strong psychology to be able to do that.
Yeah, I didn't actually, that podcast we recorded last week, I didn't know the full extent of your story, and to hear what you'd gone through that week and then to go out and run that time, yeah, it was an amazing performance. And yeah, you've obviously learned a lot over the journey in the last few years. Stu, I want to move over to you, mate. Yeah, have you got some comments on this one?
Yeah, look, I just want to pick up on something that Maddie said then, and that was sometimes we need that wake-up call. I know I sometimes need a wake-up call. We need to be shown something, we need to be told something. And I've got a note in front of me that says, unless it's catastrophic, I will run again. And I think that comes back to that perspective, can it ever really get that bad? You know, because we do knock ourselves around when we do get injured and we do get a bit down, or we have a tough time personally or whatever, and we tend to be, you know, there's a certain personality that goes with being a runner, and we can be really tough on ourselves. And I think we need to sit back. And I also just want to touch on, you know, what Josh just said then about taking that break and doing something else. And sort of, it was almost, to me, when I was listening to you say that, Josh, it was sounding to me as if you needed this time to clear your head and appreciate what you did have. And that's another note that I've got in front of me here that says we need to acknowledge and appreciate what running does for us, and what we get from it, whether it is where, you know, that we can still give something when we are injured, we can still be part of a team, we can still be, you know, we can still be, you know, an individual, we can still be a family member, we can still be a friend, we can still be a training partner, or whatever that is. And I think that's really important, that we, you know, we find our own personal way. And I sort of found my own personal way to deal with when I've had injuries, and that was simply to say, I will run again. Whether that's 2 weeks, 2 months, whatever. And I've been pretty blessed that I haven't had a lot of those long-term injuries that can really be a struggle. But I think it's also important that we find people that can help us deal with it. You know, I've got a, you know, we'll all say, oh, you know, you have a good physio, you have a good masseur, you have a good coach. All of those things are part of the package. But I think we also need to surround ourselves with, you know, with people who understand why we run, and that it does get tough for us. So it's other runners, it's non-runners, it's friends, it's family members. And I think I can become, and I'm sure everyone can, as runners, we can become a little bit selfish, but we're unintentional when we do that. And having people who are around us who can understand us, and I certainly have a lot of people who understand why I run and what it means to me. And I think that's really crucial in helping us get through those tough times, whether it is work-related stress, personal stuff, an injury, or just when you go through those patches where you're just not running well and you don't know what to do about it. And the training's not coming out right, the races aren't coming out right. But to have people around us and have that support network, to build a support network is crucial in dealing with that sort of stuff. And as I said just before, to appreciate and acknowledge what we do have, whether things are going fantastically and we're hitting some great times running PBs or whatever, or having great training sessions, or when things are tough, we still need to appreciate and acknowledge what we've got.
Yeah, you've touched on some great points there, Stu. I think,
Zacca, I just wanted to jump in and say, just in comment to Josh, when he was saying, you know, resetting the goalposts, I found a similar thing post-surgery. I think having surgery was actually the best thing that ever happened for my running, which sounds bizarre, but it gave me the chance to kind of realize that it wasn't competition or performing well or potentially being an Olympian again, or another, whatever you call it, on the second Olympian, whatever the term is. It was simply that I wanted to run, and it was the joy that running gave me, and all the other things were a bonus on top of it. And I accepted that my goalposts also may have been, and may need to be, I don't know, reset, but I realized I was absolutely okay with that, provided I could be part of the running community and the running scene again in whatever capacity. So yeah, I think, you know, that certainly gave me a big heightened level of appreciation for running, gratitude.
yeah. And actually moving on to races and training and some of the strategies you all employ. And I guess I want to actually ask a bit of maybe a difficult question, and it's around being mentally tough. And I'm going to ask all of you, do you think you're mentally tough enough when it comes to training and racing? If so, how have you developed that? If not, and is it a work in progress, and what are you doing to improve it? And we'll kick it off back to you, Stu.
This is something that you know, that you and I have spoken about as coach and athlete, Zacca, and that is that I have acknowledged that I'm not as good at racing as I am at training, and that's something that I need to fix. Yes, I'm still out there running. I'm a little bit older. I'm a masters athlete now, but I still like to get out there, and I still want to race. But I need to find a way to be better at it. And I think it's a fear in me that that I need to, and I'm working at it, I'm getting better at it, is that if I fail at training, or you have a bad training session, or you don't hit the times, or you don't get through the reps at training, that doesn't matter. But it's very different when you go out and race. And I think probably the best athletes are those who can conquer that fear that if I don't do well in this race, or certainly they can say to themselves, I am going to do well in this race. And they can rid themselves of those self-doubts. They then become a tougher athlete. And that's something that I need to work at, is that fear of, not so much a fear, I suppose, or the apprehension that comes with racing, that I feel comfortable if I fail at training, but I certainly don't feel comfortable if I'm going to, not run a good race. And I think that's something to really deal with. And I suppose, that pressure of the clock, or you've trained really well, now I have to race well. And I think that can be a limiting factor. It's certainly a limiting factor for me. And I dare say it's probably a limiting factor to other athletes when that happens. So that's something that, I've had chats obviously with you about, Zacca, as my coach, that I need to work my way through that. But it has been something, it's nothing new to me. And I think there's that perceived pressure, whether the pressure's there or not is a different matter to what we feel is there as runners, and certainly what I feel there is runners. And, and I know when the build up for me to a race can be quite stressful. But often I get a real sense of relief once the gun goes or whatever. And then I can find myself getting into the race then, but I don't know how to get rid of, as many races I've done, as many times I've run against the clock, I don't know how to get rid of that initial apprehension and to try and beat those emotions. So I think it probably comes back to that, that perspective again, that, why should it matter if I fail at a race? What have I lost? Exactly. So, it's easier. Some of these things for me are easier said than done.
Yeah, and we always, I guess we do want to protect ourselves in some ways, but then the flip side is, well, yeah, there is, like we mentioned earlier, there's always going to be another race. So, like, why not have a crack? But it's we've all been there, and we choose in certain parts of races whether to really roll the dice or maybe play it safe. So yeah, it's a part of the lure, I guess, of running, is all these aspects. Well, it's not just the training; it's also this side of things that make running.
And we forget, and I think we forget sometimes that races hurt, but training hurts as well. And why should sometimes it be any different? We do hurt when we train, we do hurt when we race. And that's something that I've tried to get into my head, and I'm getting better at understanding that too in myself.
Yeah, it's a constant work in progress for all of us, I think. Hey, Josh, you mentioned about your marathon and some of the toughness you've shown there. What about yourself? Do you think you're mentally tough enough when it comes down to it for training and racing?
It depends on your perspective of what tough enough is, I suppose. I think I ran through pain for years, and some people would call that super mentally tough, and other people would probably call that mentally weak to not stop and try and get it sorted out at some point. So it depends on your perspective there, but I certainly feel like over a long period of time that I've developed psychologically to be able to go pretty hard in training and to test the limits and all of that kind of thing, which I certainly, even on my comeback now, I feel like I can still push myself really hard, and I feel mentally strong and content in myself. Just one thing that I'd like to add though, and it's a bit of a physical thing with racing, is most of the times that you feel mentally soft in a race, for me, it's usually because I've gone out too hard. Simple as that. So, if I pace myself correctly in a race, usually I've got the mental tools there ready to go when it starts to hurt. It's usually that I'm way too early in the race to be hurting, and that I've kind of failed or, struggled a bit in that sense.
Mm. Yeah, there is a real art to that racing, and yeah, and guess planning and preparing with your coach as the best way to execute on the day can really help as well. Matt, it's down to you. Do you think you're mentally tough enough when it comes to training and racing?
Look, I'm a really harsh critic on myself, so I think I'm going to trend towards no. But I think I'm improving. I think I'm a work in progress in pretty much every aspect of running and life. I've definitely shown glimmers of toughness in racing and in training. You know, I know I've done some amazing races and I've had those moments of brilliance in training as well. I'd like to see it happen more frequently. I think for me, when I say work in progress, it's been a lot about having the energy, not just the physical energy, the emotional energy to really switch on at training. You know, I normally do have it for a race. And I've found, I guess, that I have that obviously when my life is less hectic. And COVID's probably been a really good thing for me. It's simply forced me to simplify my life. And so I think more frequently I'm turning up to training with, you know, the energy to really have thought about what the session is and what I want to get from it. Having said that, Zacca, you definitely saw me a week or two ago where I was in a wonderful mood, but I really wasn't willing to try very hard, much to everybody's frustration, I'm sure. In terms of kind of working on it and what I do to fix or to try to be more consistent with that, I think you need to practice in training what you're planning to implement in racing. And over the years, I've used lots of different things. I've tried mantras. You know, I've tried sort of thought patterns. The one I'm trying at the moment is really simply just trying to stay in the rep I'm in and not judging, I guess, a session's success before the session is over. So I very much get in the habit, both in races and sessions, of kind of maybe getting halfway in and thinking, oh no, I'm way off my pace. I feel shit. I thought I'd feel better than this. This isn't working. Oh well, should I even finish? That kind of mindset. And I still have those thoughts, obviously, but I'm trying really hard to practice to bring it back and say, it's all right, let's just get through this rep. You're still on pace. You're actually doing really well. Let's get around the back of the track, you know, 1 lap to go, that sort of thing. And almost always the session isn't anywhere near as bad as I sort of envisage it might be. Yeah, I mean, you know, on Tuesday, I think I had 7 reps of 800. I was probably having those negative thoughts from like rep number 2. But I kept trying to bring it back. And at the end of the day, I had a session that was, yeah, maybe not quite as good as I'd hoped, but it was pretty damn good. So I think it's, yeah, really practicing in training what you plan to implement. And then in the race, it's just second nature.
Yeah, I really like that one about, sorry. No, I really like that one about not judging the session beforehand, because I think we all see things come through on a piece of, you know, on their program and have these preconceived ideas of what's going to happen and how we're going to react, and you can follow suit and you can just take the easier option, or you can just like play it safe, or basically
But I think even, you know, if you're meant to run at a certain pace and you're just not, for that whatever reason on that day, you just can't do it. I think it's really easy to kind of see it as a failure already. And Mark, you know, my side talks a lot about a session not either being good or bad, or anything not being good or bad, but there's such a grey scale in between. And so you can still get so much, you know, maybe it's not the perfect session or the perfect outcome, but you can still get so much from it. You know, there's so much in between, basically. So to keep pushing towards, you know, the best that you can, rather than kind of thinking, oh, this is a failure. I haven't quite hit the paces, so therefore it's a failure. No, it's probably not. You still get something from it.
Yeah, there's a lot in that. Steph, over to you. Do you think you're mentally tough enough when it comes to training and racing? Steph might be on a bit of a delay.
I think. Oh, sorry. I'm keep on ducking out for a run. No, I think that you train how you race. So if you train mentally tough, you become mentally tough in a race. And sometimes especially in the really long stuff, if you've got a goal for a session and you're not hitting the pace, or you're just not feeling it, you're probably just training mind in those sessions. So I sort of justify that sometimes you're even if like physically you're just training yourself just to be tough by getting through those harder sessions. I think to perform well though, you have to be pretty mentally and emotionally fresh going into a race, or going into and I guess the difference between training and racing is that you train, well, I train every day, and there's certainly some days where I'm mentally I just can't dig as deep, but there's something magic about race day that makes you you just find that fifth gear, and you can and mentally you can just push that little bit harder. So I think I don't know, like I think definitely days I'm like not tough at all. I'm the opposite. I'm like, no, I'm very weak today. But then I think working on it, or just getting through sessions and focusing on, there's always something positive from every session, and that's what's probably you're going to take forward, and that's going to probably make you tougher. So I think I had an athlete today messaged me that yesterday she got out in the rain, and normally she wouldn't have, but she did, and that she felt so proud that she'd done that. And I was like, that's really awesome. Like, it's those little cookies in the bank that you can then draw on race day as well. So good old, that's like a David Goggins what's it called, reference there. But yeah, I think that I'm certainly not always tough at all, but I think that if you're not training your body in a session, most of the time you're training your mind, and if you train tough, you can't help it but be tough when it counts.
Yeah, I like it, Steph. And there's a bit
of that all came through.
Yeah, it did. It came through.
Issues 101.
And you're talking about training tough and then moving into a race setting that we all go through those moments when you do get deep in the, I guess they call it the well, or, when you're really heavy in it. And is there something specific you guys use to help you in that situation, help you get through it, whether it's a mantra, whether it's some kind of technique? I think, have you all got something you can sort of share? I'll throw over to you, Stu, first.
Let me qualify this answer by saying I don't always follow my own advice. So anything I say here needs that qualification. I think distractions, definitely. You can become a bit of a maths whiz working with the numbers. Average paces, how far have I gone, what percentage of the race have I got to go, particularly in the longer races. If I run, a particular pace for the next 2Ks, is that going to set me up for the 2Ks after that, whatever the case might be? So those little number game distractions work for me. I think chunking also works really well, depending on the length of the race. So if I, running a marathon, you might break it down in the first 5K blocks and see how far that takes you, maybe to the halfway mark, or if it's a half, maybe in 2 or 3K blocks to begin with. So I use a bit of chunking, which is good. For a 5 or a 10, it might be, one little 1K blocks, or get the first 2 out of the way in a 10. Something like that, I think, also works. And I often ask myself, what's the worst thing that happens where I'm really digging deep and it doesn't work for me? What's the worst thing that can happen if I do blow up or if I fall off the pace? And generally the answer to that is, nothing bad's really going to happen. And then there's also things like, I know how this feels. I've done this before. So you get those little affirmations, I suppose, for yourself. I've run this race before. I know this part of the course. I know what it felt like last time. I can get through here. I know how am I going to feel, and what's going to be the physical and I suppose the emotional response when I complete this particular race or this particular run. So they're little things that I try to occupy my mind with when it does get tough, when you do hit that wall in the marathon, which I've certainly experienced, and it got really ugly a couple of times. So that chunks became a lot smaller. But that sort of self-affirmation, I think, is really important. I mentioned, when I ran with my wife in a marathon in 2018 in the Melbourne Marathon, that I knew there was at a stage where she was going to finish, and that was her aim. And I said, I know you're going to finish. And I think that sort of really positive self-talk for yourself, and even for someone you might be running with or getting into a pack with or something like that, and supporting each other out there, it can be just so crucial in lifting you, but also enhancing your performance.
Yeah, some great. I really like the chunking. I think you're spot on there, and I can totally relate to hitting that wall and those chunks get a bit smaller. Like get to the next cone, even
200-meter chunks.
Yeah, yeah. It's but look, you learn a lot from those experiences. So yeah, Josh, over to you, mate. When you're deep, yeah, go for it, Steph.
Oh no, sorry, I don't want to interrupt.
Oh, you're right.
I was just going to say one strategy I've used was I write the race before I do it. Like I write down what I'm going to feel and what I'm going to tell to myself throughout the whole event, and I write about what I'm going to say to myself when I feel really, really horrible, because in events that are that long, there's like so many points of death essentially. And I just have little things that I say to myself already, like one of them is that I know it's going to happen, so I think the wall in the marathon, everyone thinks you should be able to run through, and not like a perfect race you don't hit a wall, but I'm pretty sure even Kipchoge, they go through, everyone goes through bad patches, but it's what you tell yourself at the bad patch to get you through that's the most pivotal in a race. So I tell my athletes to write their story before they go in, and I certainly do before my events, especially the really long ones. What you're going to tell yourself that's going to get you through the tough times to the end. But sorry to interrupt. Sorry.
No, Steph, that's great. Do you have anything more else you want to add? We may as well just finish your kind of one off. I think you covered it off really well, though.
I was just going to show everyone, because I thought this was funny. I found this. I did 100K to get a golden ticket in this event at the start of the year, and it has the course, and I can't really move my camera properly. There we go. And I draw it on my arm, and I write the key words, because it's got lots of up and down in it, on my arm. So it's like a bit of a map as you're going along. So then when I get to a certain point, I can go, oh, yep, that's what I tell myself now. So that's except the problem is, the longer the event, my arm's not long enough. So I'm not sure I'm going to do my next, when I go to 100 miles, I'll get another arm or something. But I would do stupid stuff like that. And I think, just little strategies, or we have aid stations in trail runs. So you have a drop bag, you write something on the drop bag that's going to be really positive, or remind you of why you're there, or write the holiday you're going to go on after you finish, or, something to get you to the end. So they're the really lame things that I do. And I encourage everyone to try them at least.
Yeah, I might have to get the markers out for my next one. But I have seen people put notes on their bottles, and even getting partners or friends to actually write something, and then they don't see it until they actually get there, which is a pretty cool way to do it, because you get a bit of a surprise, hey, I wonder what my partner's going to have on there, and hopefully it's something friendly and encouraging. But yeah, it's I like some of those concepts. They're great. Josh, over to you, mate. When you're in the well, is something you use to pull you through?
Yeah, I like to think that it's important for everyone to have a number of strategies in their toolbox that they can use depending on the situation. And one of Stu's points really made that idea clear. So I'm someone that generally likes to be really present in the race, rather than being kind of distracting myself and that kind of thing. I love to be there, and I find that when I'm running best that's happening. However, when he started to talk about blowing up in the marathon, I thought back to a couple of occasions where that had happened, and at that point, I think the best thing psychologically was to just try and dissociate from it as much as I could. So, you know, it depends on the situation that you've got yourself into, what strategy is the best to use. And I think that having a number of strategies that you can use is a great thing. One thing that I like to do is give myself some cues as well. So it might be, you know, focus on cadence or relax your shoulders, a couple of little keywords like that you can think of and have a little bit of like an instant relaxation effect on your body. So that's something that I use as well.
Josh, do you use them in training as well, or just race day?
Certainly 2017, that kind of time frame, I was regularly using some of those relaxation cues in my long sessions and things like that. Since the comeback, probably slacked off a little bit in that regard, but now I kind of think about it. I'm certainly thinking of some threshold sessions and that kind of training where I've really, you know, just keep yourself controlled. So while it mightn't be as specific as it was a few years ago, I've still had some strategies, obviously, in the back pocket to draw upon in the sessions that I've been doing lately.
Yeah, it's I know it's good to have those key words you can sort of use just to jolt yourself back in and just keep you maybe relaxed or keep you to focus on something. Mads, have you got some cues or some ways you use your tactics you use when you're deep in the well?
Yeah, mine's a bit of an amalgamation of the three previous speakers. I guess my first one would be, yeah, definitely to expect it to hurt. And I think going into a race or a session, knowing that that's going to be the case, makes you relaxed when the hurt comes. I remember speaking to someone before my Com Games steeplechase race in 2014, and I'd said something like, "Oh, it gets really hard after 4 laps," and she said, "Do you think it gets hard for everybody?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, probably." And she said, "All right. And, you know, what do you think they're all thinking? Do you think that's also the point where they're all doubting that they can go those next 3.5 laps?" I said, "Oh, probably." And it was almost just, you know, pointing out the obvious that everyone was having those thoughts, and that was expected, and that was the whole point. And if you weren't hurting a bit at some point, you know, you've probably not done the race quite right. And then having some strategies to go with from there. So I've used a combination of everything that people have listed. I've counted down minutes to go. I try to count down in miles in longer things rather than Ks, and because I can do the switch quite easily just from spending some time in the UK. So miles I like because it's a smaller number. So, you know, 3.2K to go is 2 miles. I'll go with that. I do that on my long runs too, and definitely on thresholds. I've got mantras or words that I have used over time. They're useless if I haven't practiced them in training. They don't come to me in a race if I haven't been practicing them. And I think what Josh said about being disciplined, you know, in training to be using them is really important as well. And like I said, I've tried just in the last few weeks to have that little, you know, thought before a session of, okay, this is what I'm going to try to use. Let's see if it works for me or not. So yeah, mine's a little bit of a combination of all the above.
Yeah, sounds like you've thought it through. You've played around with a few different things in training and racing to try and get it all right. Hey, now I want to just move. Like, obviously, we've all had races and we've all done, you know, had amazing runs and achievement. But there's also things where things don't go to plan, and we do have those moments where, yeah, we have a setback, whether it's an injury or actually more so if a race just doesn't go to plan. And I guess, how do you guys just dust yourself off and get going again? Like, how do you deal with those setbacks and then to reset and motivate yourself again? And we'll kick it off with you, Stu.
I think, and I'll come back to that point I made right from the beginning, and I think perspective's really important here. I think we need to, if it's been a bad race, you know, what does that mean in the great scheme of things? Does it make me less of a runner? Does it make me less of a person? And the answer to that is always going to be no. So I think that's something we can take from that. So I think that perspective is really important. And I think it's also important that, I mentioned before about having good people around you, people that understand you and support what you're trying to do. And those people can be really, really invaluable when it comes to helping you with that perspective, keeping you a little bit grounded. Because, I know I can get caught up, and as runners we can get caught up if we don't perform to our expectations. And how do we bounce back from that? Well, other people can help us bounce back from that, I think, by maybe, giving us a few home truths, telling us that, it was a crap run, but you know what, you'll do better next time, or say it wasn't so bad, and perhaps tell you what you need to hear, or what you don't want to hear. And I think that's a really good way to help us find some of that perspective. And I think, and I don't think they have to be runners. I don't think they have to be people who understand running or who run. They might be our nearest and dearest. They might be our kids. They might be our parents. They might be work colleagues. But just having that, I think, can really help us bounce back and find that motivation. So it's almost like in a very individual sport, a team is really important to us. Not a team in a traditional sporting sense, but a team in a human sense. And I think that's great. And I think the other thing to do with that perspective is we all bring something else to the start line. I think about park run, for example. I run park run for a 5K hit out, pretty regularly. Everyone brings something different to the park run. You look at the different shapes and sizes of the people that stand on that start line. They bring absolutely, there are people who might have, might be walking it because they want to lose some weight. There are elite runners. There are people who have mental health issues. There might be people who are struggling with, some sort of addiction or whatever, but they're all out there. They bring their stuff to the start line, but at the end, they've all achieved the same thing. And that can be really empowering. And I think that can be really motivating for runners of all abilities. And I suppose I'll just close this point by saying you touched on at the beginning that I'd run in competition for athletes with disabilities. I've got a severe vision impairment. I never use that as a motivating factor because that's not it. That doesn't define me as a runner or as an individual or as a person or as a human being. And I don't run in spite of that. I don't run to prove anything, because my stuff, my disability that I bring to the starting line with me is just the same as everyone else's stuff. And I think that's a great way to really humanize what we're doing and to really bring it back to the basics. And I think that's and if we do get that perspective and we do really break it down like that, that can really help us, bounce back. And I think that can really help motivate us for the next one when we see that, hey, someone else's, they got their stuff, but they're running too. And I think that's incredibly empowering.
Yeah, spot on there. There's a lot that everyone goes through, and to be able to get to the start line and just turning up and is an achievement for a lot of people.
Yep,
hey,
absolutely.
Just on this question, we actually had a listener, a viewer question come in that actually follows on from this, and it's directed to yourself, Josh and Mad. So I'll put it up here. And it's from Alan Shields. He says, Josh and Mad, how hard has it been? So it's sort of following on from this dusting yourself off. How hard has it been mentally trying to get back to the top level? Firstly, after Josh with your foot injury, and then Mads with your hamstring issues. So if you both want to attack that one.
Yeah. So I think some of the stuff that I spoke about earlier on, where, you shift your focus and you talk about, or you work on things that are in your control. You change your goalposts to your new level, and you don't be too hard on yourself, because there's a reason that happened, and there's nothing that you can do to go back and change it. And I think that over a lot of years I've developed this skill, and being a relief teacher, I use it every day as well, where I can dust myself off really quickly from anything and move on. And what I found is that if it's a bad race or something, it's so important to reflect on that and to take a learning out of it. And for most of the races that I've done that haven't quite went right, I've been able to knuckle down and focus in on something that went wrong, and then a couple of hours later, I'm usually fine and try and work on that for the next one. You know, world champs, I was not disappointed at all because I knew I had a broken foot. That was the learning from that. I did what was in my control. I did my best. There have been other races where, you know, it might have been that I've went out too hard, and my learning is, okay, next time I can't quite go out that hard, or so quickly reflecting on a bad performance, and I've been able to move on from most of those things pretty quickly.
And you, Mads, your hamstring issues, and how hard was it to get back to the top level? Because you come back, and so how hard has it been?
Yeah, I think in the initial stages post-surgery, it was all joyous. I was so grateful for every little progression I made. You know, the 30-second jog, 4-minute walk type, you know, starting point, and then, you know, all the way through to doing some good sessions. I think for me, the pressure of Tokyo, it was always going to be a really, really tight timeline. And I think it was coming a little quick. And so I think things did flick a little bit. And it was one of those things where you kind of needed to listen to your body, but there was a timeline. And it was a really important timeline. And there were stages, I guess, both pre-surgery and in the initial stages post, and really up until the last few months, where Tokyo was going to be the last gig for me. And again, COVID and lots of, you know, different things this year have given me the chance to kind of change that up. And, you know, maybe end of 2021 will be the last year, but I've also got no certainty on that. I really just want to run until I'm not enjoying it anymore in terms of competitively. So I think for me, the first stages of getting fit and being able to run 100K a week and all those sorts of things, that was fun. But really starting to have to tap into some sessions that I knew I needed to be able to do, but really wasn't ready for hamstring wise. That was stressful. If I look at, I guess, the few months or the last 5 months, you know, since we've really been racing or doing anything like that, I don't know. I mean, I think training's going really well. I'm really happy with how I'm going, handling a lot of work. I have no idea how that would translate into a race. I feel like right now, Zacca, you could probably say similar. I'm quite fit in terms of endurance. I really haven't done anything speedy, and that's a bit of a physical, you know, limitation in terms of just I haven't done it. But also mentally, I've just got to build the confidence again. But I'm really excited to try. And I think the fact that competitive racing, you know, is another 6 months away, will really mean my hammies have had a great length of time post-surgery. The hamstrings are not even remotely an issue anymore. So, yeah, I don't know. It's hard, I guess. It's always hard. I mean, you know, distance running in Australia is great, and globally it's even better. But I'm pretty excited by it. So I'd say, I don't know, I guess when the pressure's really there, of course it's challenging. But now the pressure will come back, but I think my body will be ready for it.
Yeah, no, I think you're just taking on, you know, head on and day by day, and just keep showing up, I guess, is the key. I want to wind this up because you guys have been going over an hour here and you've been really generous with your time. I've got one last question, and I think it's come in here from Bri Lai, and I think we'll just summarize it down to maybe give us your one key tip that, and I know we've covered a lot of tips here across the whole broadcast, but maybe one key tip from all of you for recreational runners and what they can do for their mindset. Stu, do you want to? So we'll go to you, Steph, because you there, Steph? Go for it.
Yeah, I'm having the most technical problem, so I might disappear again.
That's all right.
Mental tip, or training resilience tip is stay positive, plan, and you're always tougher than you think you are. Like, I just think that yeah, we've all been through a lot, and yeah, you're a tough guy. Have faith in yourself. Have that little positive fairy on your shoulder telling you can do it, and listen to it occasionally because it is right.
No, I love that. That's a great one, Steph. Thank you. Over to you, Stu.
Oh, look, I want to just come back to my my point I've been making about a few times now, and that's the perspective. You know, it doesn't matter how fast you are, how far you run, how many races you do, how often you run, but just to do what you do as an individual and have your own individual perspectives on your own running. You know, really personalize it. It is about you. And I think those two little questions I had at the start is, who do you run for and why do you run? And I think if your answer to who do you run for is not yourself, then, think about that.
Yeah, that is a great question for all runners to ask themselves. Thank you, Stu. And Josh, you want to finish up with one of your tips for a rec runner and their mindset?
Yeah, I think each individual has to, focus on their self and what they want to get out of running and not worry about anything else. See running as that part of your life and, where that sits in your priority list and how much time you're willing to give running amongst those other priorities that you've got going on, and set some goals that help you to achieve what you individually want to get out of it, and enjoy the process in terms of trying to reach those goals.
Yeah, I like that. Enjoying the process is a key one. Got to love what you're doing out there, and running's not, there's cold weather and there's some tough runs out there, so you got to really enjoy it as well. Mads, to you?
I've been trying to summarize it into one point just then, and I think I've got three, but they're quick. My first one rolls on from Josh, and it's just to remember why you started running. The whole point, obviously, you got into it was to enjoy it, so make sure you enjoy it. The second one is to just not worry about the numbers and just enjoy it, and think about the effort. And again, this is one that's taken me 6 years or whatever it is that I've been running to work out. But if you go and run something that's, a few seconds a K slower, or 10 seconds a K, or 30 seconds a K slower than you planned, it's still better to do that, provided your body's healthy, than to go back on the couch. You're still getting more out of yourself, even if you're not hitting the targets that you wanted. And my third one is just to say, take people on the journey with you. My favorite part of being a coach has been being able to be a part of other people's journeys. And, it's the same thing with training partners. My favorite thing is getting to have them help me, but also to get to help them. And so for any runners, whether it's your partner or your kids or your physio or your coach, let people experience it with you. And, when you have some highs, they can be there for you, and it's amazing. And, then when you have the inevitable tough patches, people will pick you back up and you can have more highs.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think a really good one to end it on there, guys. Thanks for all your time, and I think I really hope that the viewers enjoyed you guys for being so open and honest about your answers. And I've enjoyed it myself. So and happy running to everyone else out there. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Zacca.
Guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.